I, prophecy keeper Eliza Marais, believe that our God, by his own authority, has established times and seasons, as the Lord Jesus said in Acts 1:7. Everything I will say here is just another warning. We cannot predict the future just by looking at the Bible, but we can recognize the past through the biblical chronology preserved for more than 3,000 years. We can also understand history after the apostles through the interpretation of the Scriptures and by observing the signs announced by Jesus Christ and the prophets. Among the prophetic keys, the main one is the fig tree, that is, Israel. When it was dispersed by Rome in the year 70 AD, it seemed dead, and no one believed it would one day be a nation again. Perhaps this is why St. Augustine interpreted that the millennium would not be literal, for how could King Jesus return to reign where there was no kingdom or people to receive him? However, I believe that the amillennialist interpretation was a hasty one. After all, if the Apostle John were asked if he was an amillennialist, the answer would be obvious, for it was he who wrote about the millennium. I believe that the Church will not be in this world during the period prophesied as the millennium by the Apostle John. This period was also announced by the ancient prophets. Therefore, I consider trying to predict future events with exact precision to be a rash and dangerous action. However, regarding his return, the Lord Jesus affirmed that we could discern its nearness by observing the signs in the world. The idea of a hidden clock in the Bible came to me while reflecting on the restoration of Israel in 1948. The fig tree sprouted. The nation was re-established. 70 years earlier, in 1878, the first Jewish settlement occurred, called the Gate of Hope. Researching the Bible and history, I found patterns that caught my attention. I considered the chronology of the Masoretic texts, the King James Bible, and ancient interpretations about human time being 7,000 years and Ussher's chronology to base the statements made here. Through biblical chronology, I saw that Abraham, called to found the people of Israel, was born in the exact year 1948 after Adam. I also saw that the flood, according to the chronology of Archbishop Ussher and other theologians, happened in the year 2348 BC, precisely 1948 years before the end of the prophecies by the prophets and the beginning of the 400 years of prophetic silence. All of this was already recorded in the Scriptures millennia ago. We find, for example, in the prophecy of Daniel's 70 weeks, the angel's revelation about the time of judgment that would come upon Israel. With precision, 483 years, out of the total 490 predicted, were fulfilled. But where am I going with all of this? I want to show, empirically, that the signs in time and history confirm God's total control over events, and also to remind you that ancient interpretations already pointed to a total period of 7,000 years of human history. A curiosity led me to reflect on the relationship between God's time and ours. I thought, what if 1 second for God equals 7 days for us? I did the calculations and discovered that, in this proportion, 1 hour of God would correspond to 69 of our years. Thus, by observing that the flood occurred in the year 1656 after Adam, I divided that number by 69, and the result was 24 hours. Exactly 1 day of God's time. In other words, from the generation of Adam until the flood, humanity lived for only 1 day in divine time. If we have 7,000 years to exist on earth, and considering that 1948 was like an adjustment of the hands of this clock, I concluded that there is a great possibility, and I emphasize that this is just a responsible speculation, that between 2026 and 2035, great events will occur in the world. For, according to the count of the 7,000 years, in this period the 6,000 years of human history would end and the last millennium would begin, the reign of Christ. I am not committing heresy by speculating on dates, for Jesus made it clear that we would not know the day or the hour. But, by observing the current world, I have no doubt that the Church's time is running out. The prophecy of Hosea 6:2, which foretold the resurrection and restoration of Israel, is also being fulfilled. But this is not good news for Israel, which still today rejects Jesus as Lord and Messiah. However, when they see the church raptured and the two witnesses in their lands, they will recognize the great mistake made in rejecting the one they pierced, as the prophet Zechariah announced. A spirit of weeping will come upon them, and they will weep bitterly. However, the kingdom will be restored to Israel in the millennium when Israel says to Jesus, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And what the Apostle Paul said will be fulfilled: all Israel will be saved. Romans 11:26. And I come here, in this simple video, to warn the church and bring joy to those who await the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. Exult, church, for your redemption is near. Preach and warn the world, for the hidden clock in the Bible reveals the past that has always been under God's control, and the next great event will be the rapture of the church. Regarding myself, I want you to know that I do not represent any denomination. I am completely for the Bible. And for me, it is important to preach Jesus Christ. You cannot deny the symmetry of the year 1948 appearing so many times. Nor should you ignore that Israel is the fig tree, for it was the Lord Jesus himself who told us to look at the fig tree. Read Matthew 24:32-34. Ignore it if you wish. The warning has been given.